Cool. All right. Well, it's Thursday afternoon, day 2 afternoon, so I know it's not prime time slot. Everyone's a bit slow. There's been a lot of Drupal, but thank you for coming to our session. I'm Griffyn from Previous Next, and this is Joe from Folk.
Hello.
And this afternoon, we're going to be presenting 2 suppliers, 1 stream, how to run successful collaborative Drupal projects with multiple suppliers. We're going to be sharing some tips about how our 2 agencies work together to deliver a successful digital transformation and successful award-winning digital transformation for Catholic Schools New South Wales last year. So first off, who are we? These 2 little munchkins are us 30 odd years ago. One became a delivery manager and the other a strategic designer. I'm a big fan of Sweet Chili Red Rock Deli Chippies, as I say in every single one of these sessions. But my latest lolly obsession is Nerds Clusters, so I'd really recommend you check them out. Joe, on the other hand, is into classic chips with chicken salt. Right, let's get started. So, if everyone will please join me and humour me, please close your eyes. I'm going to take you on a journey to some scenarios. Developers, have you ever been assigned to build a project for a client? You've been handed a design spec from a schwanky UX design agency. They've been working on the job for at least 6 months. It's great, it's beautiful, but it would take about 3 years to build the bloody thing. Or at the other end of the spectrum, UX designers. If you ever work with a client on a project, you create an amazing experience with the client. It's beautiful, all the requirements are met, and you feel bitter disappointment once the devs get their hand on it and they say, yeah, we're going to roll this back. Technical feasibility budget, and you're changing all your designs. And then finally, what about the poor old project managers stuck in the middle, trying to deal with the teams that won't work together or won't even talk to each other? All of these situations suck, and it often leads to the client being let down and the project never really meeting that original vision. Well, we're here to advocate for a world where that's a thing of the past and to show you how we tackled this exact problem on a recent project. So, if you have only one takeaway from this talk, it's this. Collaboration creates better products. If you are able to bring in skilled resources sooner, discussing problems before they get past the discovery stage, you're working seamlessly, you can save a lot of headaches, and you create a better solution at the end of the day. This can apply to internal teams of your companies, but it also applies to larger multi-supplier projects as well. And that's what we'll be talking about this afternoon. But Griff, why should we collaborate? We've got all these resources in-house, we've got a marketing team, we've got that social media guy, we've got that analytics person we've done it before. Or is this kind of similar to that project we did 2 years ago? Well, we found that collaboration between agencies has 2 key benefits over going it alone. First one is, if you have a diverse team with a diverse experience, you will create a better solution. And this is catchphrased into 2 heads are better than 1. And then the other one is shared responsibility will mean that you have seamless delivery between 2 suppliers, or 1 team, 1 dream. And Joe's going to dive into the first point for you now.
Awesome. So 2 heads are better than 1. Now, we hear about the power of multidisciplinary teams all the time. You're probably sick of hearing about it, but we talk about it so much because it's true. Multidisciplinary teams are super powerful. Teams that bring diverse perspectives, experience, expertise will deliver much stronger solutions for both end users and for your clients as well. So if we think about our trusty DVF framework that's up on the screen, we know that these best solutions hit that sweet spot right in the middle. So desirable for users, technically feasible to implement, and 100% viable for our organisations at the top of that food chain. Multi-agency collaboration removes those silos that can exist in this framework, or that linear nature to problem solving that can come out of it. So if we start, we see things like we start with desirability and then we consider feasibility too late down the path. So if we look at Catholic Schools New South Wales, the collaboration model really worked in this instance, and that is because our 2 goals as agencies were inextricably linked under one contract. And those goals obviously means that our success is inextricably linked under that one contract. It can sound pretty stressful, but it actually becomes a really good motivator in terms of problem solving when you think about this DVF framework and the trade-offs that we need to discuss when it comes to it. There isn't a version where one agency takes a really long time on their timeline and then the other agency has to crunch all of their work into that short time frame. Our timelines are linked where you succeed as one team. It removes those brick walls. We can't chuck problems over the proverbial fence. UX designers like to do that to devs sometimes. Just figure it out, figure out how to build it. You can't do it when you're operating under the one contract because, again, your success is inextricably linked. Now, Griffy is going to touch on the mechanics of how this works a little bit later. But when we talk about that seamless delivery, again, the Catholic Schools New South Wales saw that come to light time and time again, but mostly in the design feedback process. So what we would see, we were working with a client who had no experience in the Drupal CMS and really not much experience in content management whatsoever because their current website didn't allow them to get in and update their content. So what we would see happen is when we would get feedback on our designs, folks, lead UX designer would talk through the implications of that feedback for the user. So why would it change the effect of the visual hierarchy of the page? What was most important to the user and why we'd put it in certain places? At the same time, previous Next technical lead was able to talk to the implications of making those changes from an editor experience. So if we change the structural framework of the page, what would that mean for how much effort it was to manage and maintain that long term? So in a single design feedback session, we were able to refine and prioritise the feedback all at once, rather than having to go through more of that step-by-step process, potentially over a couple of days. We also see a lot of benefit in that kind of 3 elements of the DVF framework in a single conversation coming through when we're talking about maybe feature and functionality trade-off later in the project. So because previous Next had been so involved from the project right from the get-go in that discovery phase, there was that really deep understanding of the user research, the strategy that had informed the design, and had built a lot of trust with the clients that when they were talking about those trade-offs, it was much easier to work through those problems at the time. Now, you might be thinking my agency is locked and loaded. We do it all. We have UXs, we've got content strategists, and we build websites. We do not need to collaborate with other agencies. And well done, great for you. But I'd really like to challenge you to think about your access to fresh perspectives as practitioners. So speaking from personal experience, I've benefited a lot from working with partner agencies over the years, particularly with previous Next on this project. It's really that idea that there's more than one way to skin a cat. So when we're coming up against a similar problem, there are different approaches that can be taken with a technology like Drupal. It's so easy to fall into those rinse and repeat methodologies as agencies. We know what works well, we know what leads to success for our clients, so we do just bust out these repeatable processes. But access to those different approaches really strengthens our expertise as practitioners. So again, an example on Catholic Schools New South Wales, I saw previous Next take a different approach to setting up the editor experience to landing pages than I had seen previously on Drupal projects. And what it meant for me in my work as the content strategist on the project was that I was able to adapt what I would typically recommend as a good content governance structure for a client of this size and scale, and make it more fit for purpose for Catholic schools based on their independent needs. And I was able to do that because I'd seen a slightly different approach taken to that editing experience from the tech guys there. Likewise, I know, speaking on behalf of our lead UI designer, that there was a lot of reciprocity and knowledge sharing in the design implementation phase, so seeing that front end come to life. It was the first time our lead UI had used Storybook, so it's reframed a lot of how she thinks about putting together design systems and documenting that design implementation as well. So these different approaches obviously developed through working with different clients on different contexts, on different projects. Sorry, I've moved too fast. Working with other agencies is what gives you access to that broader experience and expertise. So again, our work at Folk on projects with a state health department where they have a massively decentralised publishing team. I do not even want to tell you how many publishers are in that CMS. It will traumatise you as much as it traumatised me at the time. But that project is going to throw up a lot of different experiences to previous Next work with a large university with more of a centralised publishing team. And working together obviously exposes us to those different problem-solving approaches so that when new challenges came up with Catholic Schools New South Wales, we could draw on our different wells of experience to come up with a solution to that problem. So that covers the broad benefits to multi-agency collaboration, but if you've got a bit more to say on how it actually works.
Yes, thanks, Joe. So that's how working with different teams benefit the project, but let's talk about specifics. How do we structure the project? What approach do we take? And what tools do we use to ensure seamless delivery, or one team, one dream? So I think the very first thing you want to do when you're taking a multi-agency approach, week 0, week 1, is to confirm your team structure. So you can see our little diagram in the top right there. Catholic Schools New South Wales was Folk's primary relationship, and they remain the client contact for the duration of the project. They handle all the contracts, the day-to-day communications, project management, that sort of stuff. Previous next in this engagement was rather the technical validation, and we supported folk in that process. We were handled the feasibility of the designs, development of the solution, and then ongoing managed services and hosting. This really is key. You need to have a clear understanding from the beginning of the project who's doing what and who the client reaches out to for updates. It sounds a bit dramatic, but projects run much more effectively than when there's one throat to choke. So in this successful project, that throat was B. Sheldrick from Folk, our fearless leader, and she was the day-to-day contact for timelines, updates for the client. If they didn't come for us, they came through B. And so Catholic Schools New South Wales knew at all times who to talk to. Making these structural decisions early on, make sure everyone's working on the same goal with clearly defined responsibilities. So that's team structure, but we should talk about approaches. As I mentioned previously, bringing in specialised resources sooner helps make a better solution at the end for your client. And here's how we implemented this on this project. So on the left you can see what I'm calling a traditional project, and one that many of you might be in the middle of right now. You've got a design and discovery phase that has been running for quite a while. Then your development team is brought in and for the implementation, has very little access to the team that thought up the solution. The problem with this approach is you have very little flexibility for change, for feedback and agility when the stuff eventually hits the fan. So instead, we took a different approach, and I'm calling that collaborative engagement. So let's zoom in a little bit. I do want to flag that this isn't an exact science. This is an abstract. There were a lot more peaks and troughs throughout the project. First thing I want to call out here is we've got a small immersion phase down there. So immersion is a process that folk completes at the beginning of their projects, and it's essentially an information gathering period. And a key part of this phase is a CMS recommendation. So that was pre-PNX. They recommended to their client, Catholic Schools New South Wales, to go with Drupal as the foundation for their new site. And then we came into the project. As Joe mentioned before, bringing us in early paid dividends. We were able to better understand the scope, the reason why Catholic Schools New South Wales wanted a new site, and the problems they were trying to solve. And crucially, we were able to come in and take them off their plate. So, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. But realistic, just from the whole project, the main thing here isn't really to double your resources and everyone to be everything the whole time. Instead, you want to be really using the right people at the right time so that they are in the moments that matter throughout the project, when their capabilities come together and work through those problems collaboratively. So you can see those little spikes, whether they're previous next or later on in Folk. So some key examples during this specific part of the project is Catholic Schools New South Wales had their own internal authentication and SSO system. They had a live version for V1 that was live already. We came along, did some workshops with them and said, look, this isn't ready for prime time to meet your requirements. A key one of those was protected content. So being able to be a staff member of school and log in and see, okay, I see resources matching what it says in my authentication account. So we worked with them, we worked with their IT and their SSO supplier to make sure that was ready. So this is, let's say, negative sprint 3, something like that, a ways out from starting the project. If we had those conversations in sprint 0, sprint 1, you're not getting that till sprint 6. So starting that meant that we were able to plan a lot better and get those resources organised. Another one was the Find a School tool, which Catholic Schools wanted. Sounds exactly like what it is. You're able to put your address, your postcode in, and then filter by different learning institutions within that area. Folk during this period worked on the user requirements and then eventually the design, while we were focused on the API and then cleaning up that data and making sure that it was all ready to be built with. And that was great because then that was ready for us in sprint 1. There are a few other things like technical workshops for payment integrations and event management, which sort of just led us to sort of feedback to Catholic Schools New South Wales before they got into the design phase about the scope and a bit more understanding of that piece. So as I mentioned, this was really, really useful as a development supplier. We had a good idea before those dev sprints kicked off about what the overall requirements were, what the clear pitfalls were that we didn't know going into the project, and then structured those sprints accordingly. but it worked in the other end of the project as well. So as the design phase was completed and Catholic Schools New South Wales approved us to move into development sprints, folk just didn't just disappear after a handover session. So instead what we did is we planned mini catch-ups each week between Previous Next front-end team and folks UX lead, and we had showcases. These were conversations like, what have we been up to? Did it match the Figma? And the overall original vision now that the components had actually been built and had real content in them. As it always is in these sessions, yeah, they kind of match. And between that session between suppliers, we were able to tweak it pre-client demo or spin up a ticket for the next sprint and plan that a bit more further. Side note, and it was mentioned before, I'd really recommend checking out Storybook for this process. It really allowed the front-end team and the designers to work outside of Drupal and test things before it got to that level. So, as I mentioned there, the front-end collaboration sessions happened before those client sprint demos, and that was really key. That made that when the client saw it, it was looking schmick, it had the folk seal of approval, it was looking great. And then the other benefit of this project, as everyone does, is imagine a 10 sprint project, maybe sprints 8 and 9 are your QA and UAT piece. You get a nice humongous deluge of front-end polish tickets that come in, and you've got to action like a madman in 2 sprints. That didn't really happen with this project because we'd had those consistent mini feedback sessions with folk throughout the project. I mean, there was still polish to be done, but it was much, much less than any other project. This also worked really smoothly. So as folks UI lead was assigned to another project as the design phase completed, we could plan around that new project that she moved on to. So those mini feedback sessions on Tuesdays were just planned into her schedule. So it worked from a resourcing perspective as well. So they're 2 tips that I'd recommend for your next project is bring in a development team sooner and get them to take the requirements off your plate, and leave some budget for front-end and design check-ins during development sprints to ensure that the implementation looks good before the client sees it. Cool. So that's structure and approach, but what about ways of working? Well, the short version here is don't overcomplicate it. Use the existing tools and processes that work for your agency and don't reinvent the wheel. So Folk and Previous Next are 2 different agencies with different ways of running projects. In the first half of the project, which is primarily folk-led, for the design and the discovery phase, we followed Folk's waterfall approach of working with clear timelines, stage gates, and defined deliverables. And then as we moved into development, Previous Next led piece, it was Scrum with 2-week sprints and the traditional Agile ceremonies. Really, you've got to just stick to what works for your agencies, but be flexible, which I can appreciate is pretty contradictory. You know, you want to work to your strengths, but also be adapting. And I think the takeaway here would be just own the sections that you as an agency lead, but then also if things aren't working, just change them. And that's what we did through the project. Final thing for me is about challenges. So it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. We were very lucky yesterday to win the award, but there were 2 things that I want to shine a light on through the project. One common challenge for all web projects is juggling design and development. Do you design and build more components at the beginning of the project and then hope you use them later on? Or do you wait until the content starts coming in, or do you try and write it precisely to fit imaginary components, which to me seems like wishful thinking. So to make this whole process simpler, we used the New South Wales Government Design System as a base. So that gave us a good collection of components that the editorial team would be working with, and then folk worked a design language over the top of it. So we completed an audit as a team to know, okay, we want a hero banner component, we want cards. Actually, that historical timeline thing, we don't really need to do that. So we had a really good idea of what would be in the toolbox, and then we said to the content team, okay, here's the 16 things you can work with once you've got it built out, and that really helped them plan as well. So there was a few hiccups throughout this process, so like unique components, but they were flagged early by folk, and you can see an example here. It's a horizontal parallax statistics, which is a mouthful, but essentially it's an animated banner that sits on the homepage and it scrolls left to right, right to left, and it shows the number of students, the number of schools that Catholic Schools New South Wales looks after, some key facts of their presence in the state. So my tip for you, if you're starting a large web project, is consider using a design system or a component library as a foundation. Or if you're making your own, that's a great idea. But if you don't want to start from there, start from something from scratch. Audit that system and understand as a team what's in and what's out. Another tricky part is three-way commercial arrangements. As I mentioned earlier, folk maintain the primary commercial relationship between Catholic Schools New South Wales, and then during the discovery process, Previous Next as the dev supplier provided them with a scope of work, costs and terms, which was then integrated into that diagram between them and Catholic Schools New South Wales. Later on in the project, for the ongoing support and managed services and hosting, then Previous Next and Catholic Schools New South Wales entered into a contract. So there was a bit of a triangle going on. Nothing too dramatic, but just something to keep in mind. The key takeaway from this was, really, we've all dealt with prickly contract situations before, but the thing is to be crystal clear on your deliverables and your processes, and then make sure everyone's on the same page before commencing the work. But overall, my best tip for navigating challenges, whether they're internal or external, is to over-communicate. Let people know where you're at and ask questions and be flexible. At the end of the day, we're really all on the same side trying to build the thing together. So, Joe, that's how we did it, but did it work?
Yes. So through our collaborative efforts, we delivered Catholic Schools New South Wales a new website. Project managers, you'll love to hear this. It was on time and on budget. Woohoo. The new site delivers on core user needs, so it connects diocesan representatives, principals and teachers in the Catholic school network to key information that supports them in their role. And this was the main vision of the project for the client, so big green tick from them on that front. The multi-agency collaboration also helped us deliver on 3 other key success factors for the client. So the first thing there was that editing experience that I mentioned before. They couldn't edit their current website, so it was a really big focus for the client moving forward. The really close collaboration between our lead UX, content strategist and the technical lead right from the very beginning of the project meant that editing experience was a hot topic from day one. So we were able to make sure that the publishing experience married up to Catholic schools' organisational needs to really make it easy for them to manage and maintain the site. Integrations with other systems and platforms also meant that service delivery became much more intuitive through the site. So less manual processes, updating events in Eventbrite, putting it on the website. It's now a much more automated flow, which is a real positive for the team there at Catholic Schools New South Wales. Secondly, the timeline was really important to Catholic schools. They wanted to decommission their old site before they had to pay more money to rehost and support the site into the new year. So we were able to deliver a fully functional site swiftly for them by collaboratively working through those problems that I mentioned before. So typically where you might hit those speed bumps and you spend a few days either putting tools down to figure it out or potentially reworking based on kind of conflicting feedback, we're able to kind of speed through those at pace and not be slowed down too much over the overall timeline. And lastly, the third most important thing for the client was having an eye to the future as we built this digital front door for them. So Catholic Schools New South Wales are going through a broader digital transformation across their whole ecosystem. This was Horizon 1 in that broader plan. So that main public website, they obviously invested a lot of time and effort and money into it, so they wanted to make sure they're leveraging that investment into the future. So again, the collaboration piece was really important here. Every piece of the puzzle, every decision we were making, we had to make sure it was scalable and adaptable to that future state. And we're both going to be on that journey with Catholic schools moving forward. So Griff mentioned that obviously the direct contract to manage and maintain the site now sits with Previous Next, so that relationship has evolved outside of this project. Folk continues to work with Catholic schools on their digital transformation strategy and kind of the next step in their journey. And of course, if there is another Drupal product that comes along that needs building, we'll absolutely collaborate and partner again to deliver that because it worked so well the first time and the client has a lot of trust in both agencies there. So we started today with this statement and we're going to finish with it as well. Cross-agency collaboration creates better products. Consider what it could do for your agency, providing you opportunities to work on different briefs or clients, giving you access to fresh perspective or ways of working, and improving the quality of work that you deliver through that multidisciplinary approach. We've shared how we tackled it successfully. It sounds super cheesy, but it did come down to great teamwork, and communication. So contributing to those activities that don't sit traditionally within your wheelhouse, establishing really good ways of working that leverage each project team, their strengths, and making sure that they're at the forefront in the moments that matter. Openly and overly communicate and be open to feedback from the other side of the fence as well. And at the end of the day, you're going to be stronger for it. That's the end.
Well done. Thank you.
Any questions?
Does anyone have any questions?
So, for example, there's existing contracts.
Do you need a mic? Sorry, 1 second. Can we steal that? Sorry to stop you mid-question. Yeah. Sorry, Heinrich.
Say, for example, you have existing contracts, you have to work with another vendor. And one vendor wants to collaborate and work as one team, but the other vendor wants to use the traditional way, do everything themselves. And then at the end of the process, there's changes because they didn't collaborate with the other vendor.
So there's two suppliers working on a client, and one of them wants to go alone and the other one wants to work together. Is that what you're sort of saying, and what to do? Sounds a bit like a difficult relationship. You don't really want to end up, pulling the contract on each other and really forcing it and making it happen. You've kind of got to come to the table and work with each other. I'm not too sure.
I think generally speaking, all the principles still apply. So in terms of how to work together, the way to achieve seamless delivery, and again, the access to fresh perspective. So you're still getting a lot of the benefits out of it. Obviously, you just don't have that kind of inbuilt motivator that you're all working under the same contract. So it's a more challenging context that you're working within, but all the same principles apply in terms of achieving success. And my reflections on, because again, we've worked in scenarios like that with vendors that, a client is already engaged and you're kind of either coming in halfway through the project or halfway through the relationship. I think you're relying a lot more on goodwill there in that instance. But if you're not willing to concede and you're not willing to kind of cooperate and I suppose give a little bit, it's actually going to hurt you both as agencies more than it does to come together and try and figure it out despite being two separate contracts. So that would be it's a bit of a motivational woohoo line, but yeah.
There was a little bit at the beginning as well. So when Catholic Schools New South Wales, folk already had that existing relationship. You've kind of got to respect that very much, that piece. They're bringing us in as a supplier to work with them. So, you work how they want to work at the beginning and then, it forms together into one team. So, yeah. Thanks.
Thanks for that. I think you kind of already answered it a little bit here, but you mentioned that at the start of the project, folk already had chosen Drupal and agreed with the client to use Drupal before Previous Next really got involved. And my question was going to be did you already have the relationship with Catholic schools, or did you have to submit a proposal up against other vendors? And I think that's not what happened. But if there was a situation, how would it change? You go in, would you engage Previous Next first and say, we want to submit a proposal for this and we want you to be our partner, or will you submit a proposal and then find a tech partner after that, or how would that look?
I can speak from folks' perspective there. So exactly right. The Catholic Schools New South Wales example, we had already established a relationship because Catholic schools were really early in their journey. They kind of didn't even know that they needed a digital transformation. So we had that period of time there. But definitely when we see RFQs come across the desk that are calling for design and build, as an agency, we like to involve a partner as soon as possible in the process, right from quoting the work, just because it de-risks even the design phase, that risk of rework or not being able to deliver on success metrics for our clients. So we absolutely invite partners as early as we can in the process.
Cool. I think we're out of time. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Ask us any questions. Cheers.